Hello and welcome to the English Speaking Studio. I'm Jack, your co-host.
And I'm Lucy.
Welcome back to our deep dive into understanding anxiety.
So we've established that anxiety isn't always a bad thing.
Right.
It can actually be helpful sometimes.
It can.
But how do we know when it's serving a purpose
That's a great question.
and when it's just holding us back?
And it's where the concept of awareness comes into play.
Oh.
The more we pay attention to our own unique anxiety patterns, the better equipped we are to manage them.
You know, I'm hearing you say awareness a lot, but I'm still not totally clear on what that means in practice.
Yeah.
Is it just about noticing when I'm feeling anxious?
It's more than just noticing the feeling.
Okay.
It's about getting curious about your anxiety and really paying attention to the nuances of your experience.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure.
Like, let's say I'm feeling anxious about that presentation I have coming up.
Yeah.
How can I be more aware in that situation?
We'll start by noticing where you feel the anxiety in your body.
Okay.
Is it a tightness in your chest?
Yeah.
A knot in your stomach?
Yeah.
Are your palms sweating? Are your shoulders tense?
Yeah.
Really tune into those physical sensations.
I can see how that would be helpful because sometimes I just feel this general sense of dread, but I haven't really stopped to think about where I'm actually feeling it in my body.
Exactly. And once you've tuned into those physical sensations, start paying attention to your thoughts.
Okay.
What's going through your mind? What are the specific worries or fears that are fueling your anxiety?
Okay, so in the presentation scenario, my thoughts might be things like,
Yeah.
what if I forget what I'm supposed to say?
Yeah.
Or what if people think I'm boring?
Right.
Or what if I totally mess up and everyone laughs at me?
You got it.
Yeah.
By identifying those specific thoughts, you're starting to untangle that knot of anxiety and understand what's really driving it.
This is starting to make more sense.
Good.
But I have to admit, sometimes when I'm really anxious, it feels impossible to think clearly.
Yeah,
It's like my brain is just flooded with these negative thoughts and I can't escape them.
that's completely understandable.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another powerful technique that Emma McAdam discusses in the video,
Okay.
labeling your feelings without judgment.
Okay. Labeling without judgment.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that because honestly, I'm not always very compassionate with myself when I'm feeling anxious.
Sure.
I tend to get frustrated and just want it to go away.
That's a common reaction.
Yeah.
But judging ourselves for feeling anxious only makes it worse.
Right.
Instead, try to simply acknowledge the feeling without labeling it as good or bad.
Okay.
You might say to yourself, I'm noticing that I'm feeling anxious right now,
Yeah.
or this feels intense, or my thoughts are racing.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's like we're creating a little bit of space between ourselves and the anxiety so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Exactly. And by describing it in neutral terms, we're not adding fuel to the fire of those negative thoughts.
Right.
We're simply observing what's happening without getting caught up in the story.
Okay. I'm going to try that next time I feel anxious.
Right.
But what about those times when the anxiety feels really intense?
Yeah.
Like it's taking over.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else we can do in those moments?
That's where mindfulness can be incredibly helpful. It's about learning to tune into the present moment with a sense of curiosity and openness,
Okay.
rather than getting swept away by those anxious thoughts about the future.
So it's about shifting our focus from what if to what is.
You got it. And it doesn't have to be complicated.
Okay.
You can start by simply noticing your breath.
Mhm.
Feel the rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale.
Right.
Or bring your attention to your senses.
Right.
What do you see?
Mhm.
What do you hear?
Yeah.
What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you feel physically?
It's like we're grounding ourselves in the present moment so we're not so lost in those worries about the future.
Exactly. And as you practice this, you might notice that the anxiety starts to feel less intense.
Okay.
It's not that it disappears completely,
Right.
but you're not letting it control you.
Right.
You're choosing to focus your attention on something else.
Okay, so we've got awareness labeling without judgment and mindfulness.
Right.
Are there any other tools we can add to our anxiety busting toolkit?
Absolutely. Another powerful technique is cognitive reframing.
Okay.
And this one's all about challenging those negative thought patterns that tend to fuel our anxiety.
Okay. Cognitive reframing.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, it starts with identifying those automatic negative thoughts that pop up when you're feeling anxious.
Okay.
You know, those what-if worries and worst-case scenarios
Yeah.
that tend to spiral out of control.
Oh, I know those thoughts all too well.
We all do.
Like, what if I bomb this presentation and everyone thinks I'm a total failure?
That's a perfect example. So once you've identified the thought,
Okay.
the next step is to challenge its validity. Ask yourself, is this thought really true? Is there any evidence to support it?
I guess a lot of times those anxious thoughts are based on assumptions, not facts.
Exactly. We often catastrophize, imagining the worst possible outcome, even when there's no real reason to believe it will happen.
Right.
So once you've challenged the negative thought, you can start to reframe it,
Okay.
to replace it with a more balanced and realistic perspective.
So in the presentation example, instead of thinking I'm going to totally mess up,
Yeah.
I might reframe it as I've prepared as well as I can and I'm going to do my best.
Perfect. That's a much more helpful and empowering thought.
Right.
And even if the presentation doesn't go perfectly,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't mean you're a failure.
Okay.
It just means that this one presentation didn't go as well as you'd hoped.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's about taking those negative thoughts down a notch
Right.
and replacing them with something a little more realistic and kind.
Exactly. And the more you practice cognitive reframing, the more you'll start to notice those automatic negative thoughts
Okay.
and challenge them before they spiral out of control.
It's like we're building a stronger, more resilient mindset one thought at a time.
And that resilience is key because anxiety is a part of life.
Yeah.
We can't avoid it completely,
Right.
but we can learn to manage it more effectively.
You know, this whole conversation has been really eye-opening.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
It's like I'm finally understanding anxiety in a way that makes sense.
I think one of the most important takeaways from Emma McAdams' video is the emphasis on self-compassion.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to beat ourselves up when we're struggling with anxiety,
For sure.
but that only makes things worse.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get frustrated with myself for feeling anxious, like I should be able to just snap out of it.
It's important to remember that anxiety is a normal human experience.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're weak or broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's just your brain's way of trying to protect you, even if it sometimes overreacts.
It's not our fault that we feel this way.
Exactly. So instead of judging yourself, try to treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding
Yeah,
you would offer a friend who's going through a tough time.
I love that.
It is good advice.
It's a good reminder to be gentle with ourselves.
It is.
And speaking of support, the video also talks about the importance of seeking professional help
Yes.
when anxiety becomes overwhelming or starts to interfere with our daily lives.
Absolutely. There's no shame in reaching out for support.
Right.
A therapist can provide evidence-based tools and techniques to help you manage your anxiety and live a more fulfilling life.
Right. It's like if you had a physical health issue, you'd go to a doctor.
Exactly.
It's the same with mental health.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a little extra support to get back on track.
Well said. And remember, there are so many different approaches to anxiety treatment. So
Right.
it's about finding what works best for you.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
We've learned so much about the nature of anxiety, its different components,
Yeah.
and most importantly, some practical strategies for managing those anxious feelings.
It's been a pleasure exploring these insights with you.
Likewise.
And remember, you are not defined by your anxiety.
Mhm.
You are capable, resilient, and worthy of peace and well-being.
Great advice.
Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep diving deep.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Sounds good.
Until next time, stay curious and take care.